Congo's recent history had offered hope. A fresh peace deal agreed in January between the Congolese government and the majority of the rebel groups operating in the eastern Kivu region, next door to Rwanda. The aim, to end months of violence that displaced tens of thousands of people. But many of the rebel groups who've signed the deal have been blamed for the continuing atrocities. One of the most notorious of them, the FDLR, or Interahamwe, did not participate in the active engagement deal. The FDLR is made up of Hutus who crossed the border after the 1994 genocide in Rwanda. Photographer Susan Schulman has just returned from North Kivu with stills and filmed footage, along with other material from Médecins Sans Frontières. Our Foreign Affairs correspondent Jonathan Miller now reports on what the graphic images tell us.
For 15 years now, every child born's been a war child. They live with desolation and terror. They die of disease and starvation. And they grow up too fast. Their mothers and sisters are raped, and their fathers are probably dead. Their villages abandoned, so they hide in the forest. North Kivu, littered with desolate camps for the 800,000 displaced.
We live like apes, like monkeys. We make shelters for ourselves. We make them with leaves. They become our homes. The future is to die. It's dying because of all the problems. I was born during the problems. Today I'm 18 years old. As you can see, it's awful.
The ripple effects of the genocide in Rwanda still reverberate in the green hills of Kivu. A four-way civil war raging on here, even though they signed a ceasefire 2 months ago. It's killing 45,000 people every month, 1,500 a day, and half are children. This camp is called Chevrerie. This man, a displaced person himself, has been keeping detailed records and says there are now 5,500 families here. There is one tap and no proper toilet.
We've been displaced several times and to several locations. The women, the mothers, they're suffering. And that's before you even start talking about the dead. The survivors live in a disastrous situation. It's precarious. Some live in the forest. Some haven't made it here and continue to suffer in the countryside. That's why we'd like to inform the world, to push them to come here to help us.
Bakulu came here with her mother and 6 children after her husband disappeared 4 months ago.
Our life here is pitiful. We have difficulties eating, we have difficulties sleeping. Finding wood to cook with is also a problem.
Nera came here with her 2-year-old son and a fortnight ago gave birth in this little grass hut to Amani, whose name means peace in Swahili. She explained how she'd sliced the umbilical cord with a shard of bamboo she'd snapped off the shack's roof.
They burned my house with all of my things in it. We watched it burn. We took nothing with us when we fled. Everything we owned was burned in the house.
The they she refers to belong to one of the wandering bands of militia who stalk the Kivu countryside and specialise in killing civilians. This lot belongs to a new group of rogue combatants called Pareko, a notoriously brutal Congolese gang allied to another bloodthirsty militia, this lot, the FDLR, who are themselves linked to the Hutu paramilitaries behind the genocide in next-door Rwanda 14 years ago. Complicated, but there's one common denominator. It's always civilians caught in the crossfire. These women have sneaked back into their abandoned village to visit the standpipe. With their jerry cans full, they head back into the forest. They've taken a huge risk doing this. Gang rape is now the most common weapon of war. The village of Kalembe, which those women had sneaked back into, is deserted other than some FDLR soldiers. The charity Médecins Sans Frontières has finally negotiated access and set up a mobile clinic here.
The people can't return home. If they do go back, their food will be stolen. Their women will be raped. They will be attacked. And what you see is the result.
This is the result. A scared 18-year-old girl called Sifi, kidnapped by rebel soldiers and for 2 years raped so violently and so often, she was left paralysed and incontinent. Sifi became pregnant, but her rape baby was stillborn. She's just undergone surgery. Sifi says she lost her mind.
The same rebels came into our village and started killing. There was shooting and guns and knives, and then suddenly I saw my father killed with a knife and my mother by a gun. I couldn't even contemplate what had happened, so I ran away. Just ran away as fast as I could. I lived in the bush around my village. That's where I was when the rebels raped and took me. I stayed with them for 9 months.
The documented age of Kivu's rape victims is beyond belief, from toddlers to septuagenarians. This little girl is 2. She was raped. Many who survived these horrors contract HIV. Others find themselves ostracized.
There were 2 of them. They were heavily armed. When they were finished, they left. At first, I just couldn't move. I was paralysed with pain and shock. Then I forced myself to get up and walk home. But when I arrived at my house, when my husband saw me and realised I'd been raped, he wouldn't let me in the house. He wouldn't even talk to me. He didn't even look at me. He just pushed me aside and left. He rejected me. He abandoned me because I'd been raped. He abandoned our 2 children as well.
Today, the roaming civilians of Kivu shelter where they can. Those not in makeshift camps congregate around abandoned schoolrooms and in churches. There is visible fear and exhaustion on these faces. In some places, cholera outbreaks are being regularly reported due to dire sanitation and filthy water. Acute malnutrition is widespread in small children. Food supplies rarely make it through rebel lines. This month alone, more than 20,000 children will have died here from hunger and easily preventable diseases. The war in eastern Congo has reached an Orwellian permanence. It's gone on for so long, few can remember anything else. The brutal reality is that because no one outside eastern Congo feels threatened by conflict in this corner of hell, no one much cares what goes on here. Every attempt to bring peace has failed.